This is a Knowledge Network presentation.
This is my first visit to Hartley Bay, the remote First Nations village just south of Prince Rupert. It's home to the Gitga'at First Nation, a Tsimshian community. I'm greeted by Penny White from the neighboring Kitasoo First Nation. She's doing research at various sites along the northwest coast for her master's degree in biology. She'll be taking me on a quest to find Pyropia abbottiae. It's an edible seaweed like nori and a dietary staple for the Gitga'at.
It's a very important food for a lot of First Nations. It's been coined a cultural keystone species, which means that if it was removed from our culture, it would dramatically change the fabric of everything that we are.
Pyropia abbottiae was once abundant along the northwest coast, but now it's disappearing. White wants to find out why.
Our seaweed isn't commercialized, so it's not on the radar of the government to monitor. There's no regulation, so people can just go and take, and there's no repercussions. Part of what I hope to accomplish is protection for the seaweed harvesting beds, so that that can't happen, and that the seaweed harvesting beds are only accessible to the band members for whose territory they are in.
You know, it's quite beautiful at this time of day.
So what I'm doing is going to different communities and understanding what they're harvesting, where they're harvesting, and the subtle differences that aren't really that well known.
Marvin Robinson, a local guide, is taking us to Kiel on Princess Royal Island.
That's what I'd call number one seaweed.
Number one.
You don't.
Kiel is where the Gitga'at Nation have been harvesting halibut and seaweed every spring for generations.
The seaweed is the important focus of this camp, and that's because we use it for trade. We trade with our Kitimat brothers and sisters for their ulican oil. It also had medicinal properties to it, and so it's used for poultices or boils or cuts, and it's bound up.
Helen Clifton is the widow of the late chief Johnny Clifton. She's been coming here for 60 years.
Everybody shares what they're doing. They work together, whether it's getting wood or the seaweed is, although it's the main focus, but it brings everybody together.
The seaweed is harvested from rocky outcrops nearby. Robinson takes us to one of the sites where White shows me how she does her research. This is a traditional harvesting grounds?
Yeah, so the Gitga'at people come here and harvest. This is the first place where they come, first of the season.
The first thing White does is install temperature loggers in the seaweed bed. What kind of locations do you put them in?
Well, for this site, I'll take a look at the seaweed bed, and I'll put one at the top of the seaweed bed, 3 in the middle to get a more of a variation, and then 1 at the bottom. It's going to measure temperature every hour for 3 months. When I take that back to the lab, I'll get really nice graphs that for each site, that'll give me an exact indication on what was happening there at that time.
Back at the lab, White will also study ocean acidification. One of the questions she wants to answer is whether climate change will affect Pyropia.
Ocean acidification is the huge unknown about global warming. It's recently got a lot of attention because what's happening is the ocean is absorbing all this extra carbon dioxide that's being pumped into the air. And what that does is it lowers the pH of the ocean. It's like squeezing a lemon into the water.
Ocean acidity affects the ability of organisms like barnacles to build shells. This could be a problem for Pyropia because it spends part of its life cycle inside shells.
So with the disappearance possibly of barnacles or thinner shells or any number of other things that are occurring with shell-bearing organisms, it's not understood what's going to happen with Porphyra. This is the species of seaweed that people don't eat.
The next step in White's field research is understanding the plant community in the seaweed bed.
I'm looking for percent cover of different seaweeds, like including ours. Also percent cover of barnacles, and if there are any grazers. And if I know what's there, I might be able to understand why the sites that don't have Porphyra on it changed over time. So if there's fucus at one site and it's sort of creeping up into an area where Porphyra usually grows, I might be able to flag that site for rehabilitation in the future.
White also collects and presses samples, which she'll later measure and correlate back to temperature and location.
So this is the species that we harvest. And
This is the one that get harvest?
Mm-hmm. And usually what we'll do is we'll take this end part off and then just eat that part.
Okay.
How's it?
It's not bad. Not bad. I think I prefer it cooked, though, in a nice soup.
Yeah, dried.
Yeah, with some prawns and crab and clams in it, too.
Oh, it burns really fast. If you don't know what you're doing, it'll burn. It's because they burn really
Back at
quick.
camp, Helen's daughter Jennifer cooks up some seaweed.
Now I'll learn from an expert.
Oh, I've gotten burnt many times, but it's my expertise, so it can burn.
And then we get a taste of why seaweed is a Git-Gat culinary favorite.
Oh my God. This is so good. This is fantastic.
And do you flip it over at all?
That's right.
No wonder they call it black gold.
And if seaweed were to disappear, it's just another food that's disappearing from our lifestyle. These are foods that everyone has grown up with ever since they can remember. And another food like abalone, people can't have abalone anymore, and it's another chink out of the armor of our culture.
As we head back to home base at the end of the day, we're treated to some spectacular sights. We're reminded that it's not just seaweed that depends on the environmental integrity of the Northwest coast.